Hi, I'm Stefan Kesting. I'm probably best known for being a grappler, but what a lot of people don't know is I've spent decades training in the striking arts as well. And what I want to talk about today is Kime, or focus, as I learned it, and why there's a germ of a good idea there, but mostly it's counterproductive. Mostly will hold back your training. So what am I talking about? Kime is this thing that you see in karate all the time. Snap! And people holding it out. I learned it first in Kung Fu, right? We would go here, we go here, we go here, we go here, we go here, right? But it would be a snap at the end of every motion. Now, some people define Kime differently. They define it as maximum intent, hitting the guy with as much power as you can. I got no bone to pick with that. Other people define it as pushing through the ground, through the leg, through the hip, and then focusing the power at the end of the punch. Cool. But what I'm talking about, and what most people talk about, and what most people recognize it, is this snapping motion here. And like I said, I think generally it's a bad idea. Quickly, where do we see this? We see this in a lot of Kung Fu systems. We see this in a lot of Okinawan karate systems, and then we see this in Japanese karate systems. Now, not all Kung Fu systems do this. Tai Chi is a Kung Fu system. There's no snap at the end of the motion. Not every punch in Kung Fu has that snap or that focus either, right? You might have a swinging punch and then a focus punch, right? We called that focus. The Japanese would call that Kime. And for us, it was a big deal. We really wanted to try and stop that fist in midair after punching really, really hard, when that arm is 99.9% extended or 99.5% extended, just to stop it there and not have it wobble all around. It makes sense that it shows up in these martial arts because, by and large, there's pretty good evidence showing that Chinese martial arts went to Okinawa and that Okinawan martial arts went to Japan to form the karate that we know and love today. So there's this kind of cultural element to it that you don't really see in many other martial arts. You don't really see this in the African stick fighting system. They're not going whack and holding it out there. You don't see this in the English boxing systems, right? They're not going and leaving their cross out there. You don't see this in most other systems, but it's very, very common in Chinese Kung Fu systems, in Okinawan systems, and in Japanese systems. You might be forgiven if you say, Stefan, since all these martial arts do it, there must be something to it. Why do they do it? Well, that's a good question. One I've done research on. One I've asked lots of people about. And really it comes down to a couple of things. Number one, it looks good, it feels good, and it sounds good. If you're wearing a gi and you do a punch, right, there's that nice snap sound. Let's try that again with special effects. Whoa! You heard that snap, right? That's because a canvas gi suddenly went snap. And in fact, a lot of karate gis get made so that you get that nice snapping sound when you do that punch. Makes you feel like a badass. Sounds badass, makes you feel like a badass. Makes you feel like a badass as well, because if you throw a powerful punch and then stop it, you can feel the power of that in your body. And it really does seem like a lot of these Asian systems, the Kung Fu, the Okinawan systems, the Japanese systems, a lot of their practice was solo practice. Usually either in repetition form, standing in a horse stance, throwing 1,000 punches in the air, which I've done, or in a kata form, right? You're here, you're here, you're here, you're here, you're here, you're here. And you're doing thousands and thousands and thousands of reps like that. So there are a couple of arguments how doing tons of solo practice can lead to this snapping thing. Number one, it allows your instructor to come by. And if you're here and you freeze, he can come by and correct the position of your little finger. No, grasshopper, this finger should be back. This finger should be bent. This finger should be straight. This thumb should be like this. And then he can go around the whole class while everyone's dying there in a horse stance and correct everybody's finger position. Next position. Okay, grasshopper, no, you shouldn't have your little finger up. You should have your body straight. You should have your legs wider apart. It's easier to teach in a large context, a one-to-many context. Easier for an instructor to go around and say, oh, they've all got it right. Next move. Okay. I got to correct this guy again. That might well be why this evolved. Now, the dumbest explanation for Kime that I was given initially when I came across this concept was that it allows for an efficient transfer of kinetic energy from your fist to your opponent. That's very impressive sounding. That is just pseudoscientific. That is just bro-sciencey or bro-physicsy enough to convince somebody who doesn't have any understanding of physics. One reason, though, that's not entirely wrong is that it helps protect the joint. If I'm just here and I'm loosely throwing that cross out and I'm not using muscle to bring it back, but I'm allowing the joint to go straight, then hyperextend a bit, and then for the arm to snap back, I'm doing that with no muscle retracting it. I'm not going hard. I'm already beginning to feel it in my arm. If I was just snapping my leg out and allowing the leg to hyperextend and come back, that would also be bad, right? Eventually, I would hurt my knee. I would hurt my elbows, I would hurt my shoulders, and I would hurt my knee just by allowing the power to go out and allowing the joint to bring it back. So the germ of truth in this idea is that you don't want to just let your joint go out, snap, and then come back. That will, over time, lead to joint injuries, especially in your elbow, especially in your knee. So the germ of truth is that if you're using your chest and your tricep and your anterior deltoid and your hips to throw a punch, you got to use your antagonistic muscles, the muscles that oppose that motion, like your lat, like your bicep, to kind of stop the punch just before full extension and bring it back. And at the same time, you also have to dial it in to, like, if the guy's head is here, am I going to hit it? Am I going to hit it? Oh, I'm not going to hit it. All right, I won't extend fully. Am I going to hit it? Am I going to hit it? Am I going to hit it? Yes, I am going to connect, man. I'm just going to let this punch fly and put all my energy from my fist into the guy's head. So the germ of truth is that you don't want to let your joints completely snap straight, but that doesn't mean that you have to freeze it in midair. It could mean that you do this, where you use your muscles to bring it back as fast or faster than you put it out there. The fact that my muscles are stopping a punch means that the force of that punch is being absorbed by my body. It doesn't mean that if I punch you, make contact with your head, and then freeze, that more of the power from my fist goes into your head. That's not at all the case. I'm actually robbing, if I've got 10 units of power, and I connect with your face and transfer 3 units of power, but then freeze, my body is absorbing 7 units of power. If I punch and follow through, then your head is probably absorbing 7 or 8 units of power. I've got a great way to demonstrate this. All right, we got a nice heavy bowling ball. Let's modify it a little bit so that we can add some Kime to its impact. This is your punch on Kime. This is your punch without Kime. Clearly, one of those two was more effective than the other. On one of them, most of the energy of the swinging bowling ball ended up in the restraining strap. It's like the antagonistic muscles that freeze your punch in the air. Now, boxers don't freeze their punches. Nobody hits harder than a boxer. Thai boxers don't freeze their kicks. Nobody kicks harder than a Thai boxer. When I'm chopping wood with an axe, I don't freeze the axe halfway down the log. I try and cut right through the log. When I'm hitting a nail with a hammer, I don't try and focus so that the force of the hammer stops halfway down the shaft of the nail. I try to flatten that nail directly all the way into the wood. By focusing your punch for thousands of reps, and in the kata for thousands and thousands of reps, you are developing bad habits. You are learning to punch at the surface and then stop the power. This is a real issue when people who've done a ton of kata training start sparring. They land a punch and they don't know why it doesn't hurt the guy. And the boxer goes, but dang. And he's like, oh my God, that really hurt. You're actually training yourself to make yourself less effective than you would be if you didn't do this beautiful, smart, sharp looking, sharp sounding, badass feeling motion of freezing in the air. You want to be effective. There's something that's potentially even worse than killing your power. This idea of freezing and standing there, even just for a second, allows your opponent to do all kinds of fancy things. Allows them to grab your arm in midair. Try grabbing a cross of a boxer. Impossible. Try grabbing a jab in midair. Impossible. I did a video a long time ago with Burton Richardson who talked about this idea of coming forward and posing to be the worst habit in martial arts because it allows the guy to then come up with a super fancy counter that would never in a million years work against pressure. By learning to freeze, you're making yourself predictable and you're allowing the other guy to do things that you'd never be able to pull off, that he would never be able to pull off. if you're actually moving in and out. Finally, learn to freeze your arm and turn your arm into a solid object, I think has a tendency to have people paw their punches, especially as they get tired. Because instead of being used to in and out really fast, it's in, freeze, and then when they relax, their arm comes down. So even when they're making the transition to more of a kickboxing or a boxing style of punching, they still retain that bad habit of freezing up, and then when they relax, their arm goes here. So I think you see more of this pawing motion for people who've been classically trained with this Kime, with this focus, than you do for people who've been trained to do in and out right from the beginning, staying relaxed, tensing just for a second, just long enough to prevent that joint from overextending, just long enough to prevent that kick from overextending, and then retracting the leg. If it goes out at 100 miles an hour, it comes back at 200 miles an hour right away. If you found that interesting, if you found that useful, I got 3 other suggestions for you. First of all, obviously, like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, do all the usual YouTube stuff. Number 2, check out my podcast. It's called the Strenuous Life Podcast. And if I've upset people on this video, you should go and look and see how many people I upset with that podcast. Thirdly, go to Self-Defense Tutorials and get on my email list. I send out a ton of really detailed, really high-quality training tips and fighting tips there geared towards self-defense and martial arts training. And really, you're doing yourself a disservice by not being on that mailing list. If you don't like what you get, unsubscribe at any time. All right, guys, take care.